This episode was recorded in the Welsh River Studio, and you are listening to the Wholesome Way podcast, hosted by Alexander Lobb. Hello, Wholesome Wayfinder, and welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to a brand new solo episode, fresh off the server, so to speak. In last week's episode with my guest, Susanna, my life and career coach, we briefly touched on the realm of creativity and the beautiful wonders it can do for us as human beings. I wanted to break this topic down for you more because I believe it's one of the easiest ways to start expressing yourself and living your life as the person you truly are. Creativity reveals what gets us out of bed in the morning and the many amazing and fulfilling paths you can turn your life towards. Creativity is actually one of the key pillars of this podcast. If you remember in my intro episode, the idea, the mantra that you are the creator of your reality. And you can start becoming that person at any moment of your choosing. So after this episode, perhaps it's time to take the big leap forward and become the creator within you. I wanted to open up about a memory of mine that took place in primary school in year 6. So I was 12 years old and I was in a composite class made up of year 5 and year 6 students. And I remember this one day in class where a year 5 student, so a year younger than us, which is already a little bit daunting for them because you're essentially working alongside every day students older than you. I remember this classmate of mine, Sean, and a very unsavory moment that happened in our class was a moment of real sadness and empathy for me and that I had for Sean. We were doing an activity that involved designing the front cover of our workbook. We probably all remember that, getting out some textures, some colored pencils, and designing the front cover as a creative activity. And I remember after we'd done this activity, we'd moved on to something else, and our teacher was marking the designs of our workbook. And she stopped the class at one point, got our attention, and essentially named and shamed Sean in front of the class for his ugly creation of the workbook that he'd produced. At the time, it didn't seem too bad because you sort of accept what the teacher says and their authority, and you respect their authority. But reflecting on it now, that is one of the worst things that you could ever experience as a student, because you're essentially having your spirit fractured, because creativity and your soul, your spirit, are inextricably linked. That's a fact. And I just felt such sadness and empathy for Sean in this moment. And the reason I'm saying this is I don't want to get down the path of the pitfalls of the education system, but we really have to work hard on unlearning these limiting beliefs that creativity needs to be judged and benchmarked against others and their work, and that only the gifted and talented have the right to be creative and share their work on the world stage. I am not creative. We've heard other people and we've heard ourselves say that before. And I believe that is one of the worst phrases we could ever say to ourselves because, as I mentioned, what you are doing is you are creating a fracture in your spirit, in your soul, because your soul is linked to the expression of your creative side. And when you say that, your word is law. When you speak something to someone or generally into existence while you're alone, it becomes your reality because when you say something, you believe it, and other people will too, especially if you're saying that again and again, or even thinking about it regularly. You are doing your soul, your spirit, a disservice because everyone, and I mean everyone, is a creator. And part of this unlearning of the limiting beliefs that we're not creative comes from judgment. We care about what other people think of us. And we often believe that we're not good enough to be creative and show other people. Some really inspiring stories that I've heard from books that I've read, specifically Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss and his podcast. I recall an interview that he had with Dan Carlin, who is the host of a very popular series of podcasts, Hardcore History and Common Sense. And Dan famously said, don't be afraid of something you are not qualified to do. And he learnt that early on in his podcasting days. He used to love telling stories. And he mentioned a time when he was sitting at the dinner table with his mother-in-law telling stories about history. And she said to him, you should make a podcast about these stories that you're telling me now. They're fantastic. And he said, I'm not a historian. I'm not qualified to tell stories and distribute that sort of information online. And she said, I didn't know you had to be qualified to tell stories. And Dan thought, wow, she's right. And that story from Dan Carlin actually inspired me to start my podcast, because I really thought, wow, I want to share something with the world. I want to share my knowledge and learn more about health and well-being. The next day, I literally bought my microphone to start podcasting and start the wholesome way. Robert Rodriguez, a famous director and cinematographer, who, for all the 90s folks listening, he was the one who directed the Spy Kids franchise. Robert Rodriguez said, you don't need to know. Trust comes first. And he believes that any job is made up of 10% technical and 90% creativity. If you know how to be creative, trust and getting started takes care of the rest. Look at Ed Sheeran. He publicly admits that he could not sing when he first started out. And the proof is on YouTube. There's a video of him showing a reporter a video of him live on television singing one of his first songs and having a really croaky, off-pitch voice. Even famous people like Vincent van Gogh, take him for an example. When he was alive and painting, people hated his artwork because they were deemed sloppy, crude, and offensive to the more sophisticated art scene and doctrines in the 1800s. Everyone can be creative, and we don't need others to tell us how good our creativity is. So what does it mean to create? Creating literally means to bring something into existence. From a scientific standpoint, being creative changes your state from survival to peace. Science shows that when you're in a state of creative flow, you are leveraging both hemispheres of your brain, a beautiful harmonious symphony between the right hemisphere that controls intuition, feelings, emotions, and the left hemisphere, which controls your logic, structure, and attention to detail. And when you are so connected in the present moment, you're in your flow state of creativity, you're tapping into your infinite potential, the maximum power of your brain in a place where all possibilities exist. Have you ever been in that creative flow state before? Maybe you've heard about it. If you know any musicians or you're a musician yourself, improvising on the guitar or on the saxophone with a background tune or riff requires a lot of creativity. You have the knowledge of the scales and the notes from your experience, but being able to improvise requires a creative flow state that just flows. Artists have spoke about letting the paintbrush do its thing. They cannot explain to people how they created this masterpiece because every piece is different. And they are in that flow state, not thinking too hard and not thinking too little. This can even be applied to sports. Take soccer players, for example, having to think on the fly different ways to play and collaborate with their teammates and come up with a way to score a goal. Every goal is different. Yes, there are patterns, but being able to create that pattern in the moment requires improvisation and a flow state. Or even a tennis player during a match against a player they've never played against before have to identify those weaknesses of that opponent and direct the ball to a place that will reveal their weakness so they can win the point. Often when you reach this creative flow state, time, space, issues, problems, people are completely forgotten and time flies. You look at the watch and you've been painting for 3 hours. And within that state, you feel an inner peace and feeling of joy that just can't be matched by any other experience in life. And here's the thing about creativity. It's not just about art or music. You can bring creativity into any area of your life, not just the hobbies. For example, when I was working in my previous company, it was a fully remote role, so no office, hardly got to see my teammates. And being a senior colleague, I decided to suggest that for my colleagues who were in Europe in the same time zone as me, that we meet up for a virtual coffee every Friday before work at 8:30 to simulate that office mateship, that camaraderie, and a chance to speak and talk to each other and get to know each other outside of work. Because being in the office, that's often what you do. You'd grab a coffee before work and just not able to do that. And it works wonders because you realize that, yes, I actually do have colleagues that exist and we can work together and have fun together. Another example, maybe your significant other at home doesn't like your golf clubs being stored in the bedroom. So you come up with a way to make a wall attachment, go to the home store. Bunnings that we have in Australia is the number one. Grab some hooks and install a wall attachment in the laundry room or the garage to hang them up. So why is creativity so important to us? You might be thinking that. Well, number one, it kind of goes without saying, but it brings you an immense amount of joy and brings you into those positive energies of love, peace, and gratitude, shifting you away from those negative emotions and turbulence of judgment and overanalyzing people and things. Because there's a harmony between the right side and the left side of your brain. Think about when you were a child. Maybe you've seen your home videos recently, playing with arts and crafts, making a sandcastle, building Lego. That was my one, my favorite activity. And perhaps you've seen the beautiful smile and contagious laughter that your parents are catching on film. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I've heard from older self-development speakers and influencers is to stop taking life so seriously all the time. And don't, for the love of God, let that inner child in you disappear, because there is so much beauty and fun to be had in life. And when you're not using that judging, analyzing side of your brain, you're able to see the beauty in life. When we're looking at the ocean, you don't tell someone, oh, look how beautiful that 1,374th wave is coming towards us this morning. You don't have to explain that logically. You just say, look how beautiful the waves are on the ocean this morning. Or falling in love. You don't have to explain to someone the equation of why you fell in love with this person and why they are your soulmate. You just feel it and you know it deep down without the logical, rational explanation. So moving away from that logical left side of your brain and feeling into the right side and the harmony between them. Otherwise, you're letting your analytical ego mind come through, which creates disconnection and separation from nature and people. One of my favorite spiritual idols that I listen to a lot, Deepak Chopra, has an album on affirmations to reprogram your mind and your soul. And my favorite affirmation is non-judgment. Deepak explains judgment as the opposite of creativity. So it's creating turbulence in your mind and interferes with the creativity of our soul. He says when you judge someone, you're saying someone is wrong, and this creates separation. And it's the ego's defense. And when you judge, you are shutting off your true self because you are fighting against creativity. Number 2, creativity allows you to become a more positive problem solver. And you start to look at life with a more positive outlook rather than life happening to you and doing you wrong. When you start to create and play into that side of yourself, you have no concern for who or what is destroying something, your life, or the world. You just start doing what you got to do. I heard a guest speaking, his name's Jordan, on a favorite podcast of mine. And he's a self-mastery life coach. And he emphasizes the fact that we all need to create more. He gives the example, if you have an issue with the food system, you don't like the fruit and veg that's coming through in Coles and Woolies in Australia back home, or the bread's always so artificial, then grow your own food. If you have an issue with something, use creativity to start putting your resources into that. We now live in a world of easy access and abundance to everything. You have the tools that you need. And he says, realize you have all the ingredients to make this meal. You just got to start chopping the vegetables, man. And I love that one because we literally have everything we need. You just got to start taking action and taking the time and the energy to create and solve these issues that we're faced with. To give you an example of how it can benefit your own life directly from a problem-solving perspective, if you're feeling lonely or you're not meeting up with your mates much, or you're struggling with relationships in general, creativity fosters connection with others. If you want to have a healthy relationship with someone, create with them. Find some sort of activity, whether it be art, maybe you go to art classes together, or perhaps you go to a pottery class or a dancing class, and you'll see things sprout from that shared creative activity, new life, new conversations. And at the same time, you get to learn a new skill. Over the past year or so, my partner and I have really been getting into cooking, especially at dinner time. We get this home delivery service called Gusto, and they send you this big package in the mail with all your weeknight meals, the raw ingredients, the recipes, and the instructions on how to make them. And dinner has really become a fun, creative, shared experience together. And we get really excited about what we're going to be eating because it's always different. And we get out all the ingredients, divvy up all the instructions, pop on some smooth jazz music, do some dancing in between. And we also get to learn new techniques, how to chop something more efficiently, or which spices and which herbs go with what. So it's a kind of like a symphony of these different feelings and emotions, and it really becomes a novelty. And then you get to sit down together and talk about how good this specific ingredient tastes with this one, and you get to appreciate that, wow, we made this and we get to enjoy it together, discuss how it was made and what we learned along the way. There's something beautiful about cooking. So creativity allows us to become problem solvers with a positive outlook in life. And the final benefit of leaning into the creative side of you is it gives you the time and space to actually slow down and prioritize me time. Getting into a creative activity really allows you to put life into perspective, to realize that once you get into that creative flow state, you forget these perceived problems that you're having at work, at home, or internally, and that these problems don't have to run your life. And there are solutions. That's your creative mind slowing down and your right and left sides of your brain working together If you're creating alone, it's a chance to recharge and show yourself that you matter and what you love doing matters. This me time and creating in your me time is so important. If you're someone like me, I used to run around doing a million different things and activities during the week, and mostly to please or make other people happy and to make sure that I was a good friend. And I was giving energy and time, and I loved doing it, but I found myself really depleted in my life force and my energy because I was not prioritizing any time to myself and to create, to use both sides of my brain in harmony and have a positive outlook. So, leaning into your creative side can be incredibly beneficial for our lives. Now, I'd like to give you, as always, a practical way to start becoming more creative and letting yourself be creative and not being afraid to do something that you're not qualified for. Step one, think back to your childhood or your teenhood and about the activities or the hobbies that you like doing by yourself or even with your mates, and pick it up again. Or if you can't remember, open ChatGPT, outline and list all your interests, what you love doing, what you're interested in, topics, and ask it to give you suggestions on a related creative activity that you could start doing right now. One of my favorite activities was building Lego. I absolutely loved doing that when I was a kid. And I can remember Dad always coming home from a work conference overseas, and he would bring back a huge box of Star Wars or Harry Potter Lego. And it was just the most amazing gift. And I always look forward to that and sharing that activity with Dad. So thanks, Dad. And another one was learning French. And that's one that I've kept up regularly. When we moved to London, I realized that there were so many French people living in London and so many French conversation groups. I did French throughout school and throughout university. And so I wanted to keep up that hobby. And I found a group conversation class, and it really allowed me to use that creative side of myself to learn new vocabulary and make sentences on the fly, talking with people who are also interested in that hobby. Step two, invest some money in that activity. We are all motivated and incentivized by money. So buy a quality item related to that activity, take it seriously, because that's going to keep you accountable and make you think, oh, I've spent money on this. I've really got to invest my time and actually stick to it. For example, I bought this good quality microphone that I'm speaking into and talking to you now last year when I was deciding to start this podcast. And I didn't start it for a few weeks, but actually physically buying this microphone and having it sit in my bedroom really brought it that much more quickly into becoming a reality for me, because that physical microphone was there and ready to go. And so I just had to pick it up and start talking into it. Step three, prioritize your time and environment for creation. What I mean by that is make your environment conducive to engaging in that creative activity as regularly as you can. If you're working from home, put the activity within eyesight from your desk if possible, and try and put it between you and your phone so that when you need to take a break, you're more likely to do that activity because it's in front of you and you love doing it, especially if you're in a busy workday. It's a really good technique. Even if you just set aside 10 or 15 minutes a day for this creative activity, each week you're going to play into and start leveraging that creative side and that harmony in your brain to becoming the creator and opening your eyes to a world of opportunity and possibilities. If you don't have 10 to 15 minutes in your day for creativity, you should seriously review your life priorities, in my opinion. And if you're worried about what people will think, or you're worried that it's not going to be worth it, start by removing the I am not creative thoughts or words from your vocabulary. Catch yourself before you think it or say it. And start saying that you are creative in front of the mirror or in front of others and show them what you've been creating. And if you find yourself in the unlikely scenario where people are making fun of you or judging you, you need to run as far away as possible from those people because they are serving absolutely no purpose for you anymore. Because as I mentioned before, if we are judging or shutting down creativity, we're essentially creating fractures in our soul and our spirit and ultimately our health. It's all linked. So you need to find like-minded people who are going to support you and who are going to share that creativity. Step 4, don't be shy. Share it with everyone. It's never been easier to express ourselves and our passions with the world and to access billions of people. It's so easy to set up an Instagram or YouTube account. And I take this podcast as an example. When I released my first episode, the intro episode, my partner asked me after a week or so, why haven't you told anyone about it yet? And I thought, I actually don't know. But upon reflection, I realized that I was still worried about what people would think, worried about being made fun of or questioned about where I was putting my time and energy, which is completely irrational. So don't be shy. Share your creativity with the world. Creativity is your true nature. And once you lean into that side of yourself, you'll see that new opportunities, revelations about problems that can be solved, like-minded people and feelings will rise up within you and your world. And if you stick to it regularly, soon enough, you'll become a completely different person, radiating with more joy and fulfillment than you can ever imagine. So what are you waiting for? Stop holding back the real you, get creative, and show everyone what you can give to the world. Good luck. I hope something resonated with you in this conversation and that you've taken a practical tip or two to set you on your wholesome way. If you liked what you heard, please give The Wholesome Way a follow on your podcast app so you know exactly when each weekly episode is ready to stream. And if you would like to be super generous with helping me grow the podcast, click the share button and send it via an Instagram story, a DM, or a WhatsApp message to someone in your family or close friends who would truly relate with the themes, ideas, and practical tips in this episode. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen today and for joining me on this incredible journey. Stay wholesome.